What's up, ladies and gents? Welcome to another debrief with the ones and only. Here to talk about our shift, how it's going, what we could have maybe done differently, the ugly, the truth. It's all here. Let's put it on the table, baby.
Yeah, I'm excited. Today we're going to focus on how to stand up for yourself as a nurse, especially as a travel nurse, because as travel nurses, we're on the bottom of the totem pole. People like to dump stuff on us because we're sometimes there to be dumped on. It sucks.
We're the moving chess piece of this hospital. We sometimes float twice a shift. It gets really annoying. And even making a schedule, man, we're at the bottom of the totem pole where we just get the scraps. So staff gets a schedule, the peer DM staff gets a schedule, then the travelers just fill in the blanks. And to be honest, our schedule hasn't been the best.
Horrible.
Going back and forth with that. Honestly, this is a perfect episode of standing up for yourself because I just had a light bulb moment here before the things that I want to talk about. Look what happened with our schedule process. So we have a group chat with a bunch of travelers in our hospital. I recommend you starting a group as well if you can, just to kind of collaborate together. We have a very bad scheduler. So what happens is we have schedules that we don't like. So as travelers, we like to do shift swaps. And then what this hospital wanted to do is they wanted to inhibit that from happening because we've been changing shifts too much. So all the travelers heard about it. They rallied. They messaged their managers, their recruiters in the agency to see what's going on and why is this policy happening. So what ended up happening is we stood up for ourselves and they struck that down.
It's interesting they bring that up because I'm thinking about it now, and it's like the scheduler doesn't take any care to do our schedule or anyone's schedule whatsoever. And now what's going on is we're doing the shift swaps, and we're adding work to his life technically because he's the one that has to take care of these swaps. So it's almost, I don't want to say it's payback, but it's almost like karma in a sense. Hey, you don't care about our needs as travelers and you're just going to wishy-washy do the schedule without putting any effort into it, then we're going to find swaps. We're going to do swaps. So it comes full circle. You don't want to put in the effort proactively. Now you have to put in the effort post schedule because we're not getting what we requested, and we're gonna find a way to get it.
Right. Even looking at this background, right? We're recording in an Airbnb because we're moving locations. Our house is getting currently fumigated. We reached out to the scheduler a couple weeks before. We left multiple voice memos. We said, hey, we're getting our house fumigated for 3-4 days. Can you move our schedule at the beginning of the week? That'd be great. There's 15 plus travelers. They could totally make this switch happen. Of course, we're working on the days we're getting our house fumigated. So screw you, bro. You're an asshole, dude.
Yeah.
Low key. You're not fair. But anyways, going into standing up for yourself, that was one situation. So I floated to a DOU step-down unit. And of course, they're making assignments, trying to figure things out. So, the staff have pretty decent assignments. And I had a assignment with crazy movement. If I didn't have the charge to help me out, I have no idea how I would manage. So I had one patient that within 20 minutes of my shift, he went down to IR. He had a cholecystitis, and he went to go get a drain placed. So as that was happening, they wanted me to get an ER patient. Okay, so that was on the board. And within that 20-minute time frame, they also told me I'm going to get an ICU transfer downgrade. So I have only one patient technically, and I'm going to have 3 total. But both of those are admissions, one patient's leaving. And I'm like, guys, that's not fair. Right away I went to the charge. And they wanted me to move assignments, and they wanted to give me a patient that just passed away, and the family's in the room. And I'm just like, well, I don't know if that's more work to me because now the family's going to be there asking questions. I have to advocate for that, fill out paperwork. I have to bag the patient, as sad as that sounds, and then I'm probably going to get an ER.
Yeah.
So I'm only going to delay that. So how come you don't switch up the assignment to make it more fair where maybe everybody gets a swap? But anyways, so within those 2 hours from 8 to 10 p.m., I got the patient from ER. As that was happening, literally my IR patient came back from the procedure. So I had the charge of the breaker trying to help me out while I'm settling another patient. That ER patient was mucus plugging out on BiPAP, was suctioning her out. And then within 15 minutes, I had another ICU patient come in. That is completely not safe. I'll be a workhorse and I got it done and I hustled and it's crazy. I can't even recall if I floated during that time. Who knows? If I floated, geez, that was too much. But I think I actually ended up staying the full 12 hours on that unit. But it's just not fair to be thrown around like that, where I understand that there's nurses that are coming in from the previous night and they want the same assignment. That doesn't mean that the acuity is going to change. And maybe as a charge nurse, you have to adjust the assignment to make it work for everyone. Just because there's 2-3 nurses that have the same patient, and then one nurse is going to be struggling in swimming or sinking in this case, like, that's not fair. You have to create that balance.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't have too much trouble in this rotation with getting the like decent acute patients, but there was one event that comes to mind. I had a DKA patient and one empty bed, and when I came on shift, I was treating DKA, and then like around 7:20, they were calling a report from the ER, and I was told I'm getting another DKA patient, and I'm like, in Chicago, I would have easily taken 2 DKA patients, but here in California, you have a little bit of more wiggle room and room to say things.
Give me a princess.
Yeah. So I was like, hey, talking about charge, I'm like, hey, I'm getting another DKA patient. It might be a little too much, because what if somebody goes hypoglycemic or we have really bad labs coming into a DKA patient? So I tried to kind of finagle my way into not getting 2 DKA patients, because so this hospital isn't super acute, which is it's very nice. So sometimes our patients in the ICU aren't, you could say, technically ICU patients. Sometimes we have tele patients on there that need to be transferred out, that got better, or step down patients. So I was like, it's not really fair that this nurse gets 2 step down patients and I get 2 DKAs, because I know I can handle it, but just imagine if they both go hypoglycemia at the same time, something like that, or their labs are off, their K is low, or their MAG is low. It could be an issue. So I kind of convinced them to kind of give me 1 DOU patient and 1 DKA, because you really don't know. DKA, it could be a very high acuity case because they could be really, really sick and their labs might be all off, or a DKA could be a walkie-talkie patient that you're just trying to stabilize their blood sugars. It could go both ways, but if you throw in the protocol that they use, where it's like you're always on this same unit, like for example, I had a DKA patient. They were on 6 units every hour, and it was a 2-bag system. So the only thing we're titrating is the fluids. You're getting either, I think it's D10 with potassium or 0.9 with potassium to kind of help regulate their blood sugars and prevent them from going too low. So if your blood sugar is anywhere below 200, they're getting 250 of the D10. If their blood sugar is between 200 and 250, they're getting half D10, half 0.9. And if they're above 250, they're getting just the 0.9 with the potassium. And I don't like this protocol, to be honest.
Right. And the fluids might change depending on what's going on, because I had a patient on same thing, DK, and it was on half normal saline with 10 milliequivalents of K versus 20, and then D10. So it's a little bit weird how they do it, but I guess it's safe.
Yeah, we should do an episode about different DK protocols, because to be honest, I prefer the one where you're titrating the insulin, because I feel like you're doing more and you're pushing less insulin, or you're pushing more insulin when you need it, instead of maybe just having a one unit base of like 6 or 5 and just waiting to hopefully it normalizes. Because I had a recent patient, not the same shift but a different shift, where she was on 5 units and her sugar was coming down super quick. It went from like 355 to like 280 something, then it was 214, then it was like 156, and then when it hit 6 o'clock, so that same patient the same patient I'm talking about right now, that patient was on a 2-bag system with just the set unit rate, so her blood sugar were going down real quick, and then the protocol is once the blood sugar is under, I think, 200, 250, you stop the insulin drip, and then you check the blood sugar every hour for 2 hours, and then you check it again 4 hours later. So when I turned that insulin drip off and I gave her the sub-Q insulin, an hour later her blood sugar went from like 131 to 86, and I was like, oh shit, she's probably gonna be hypoglycemic when I check it again. And I checked it again the second hour where insulin was off, it was 47.
Damn.
So if you were on the other protocol where you're titrating the insulin, when she's in the 100 range, the 200 range, you would down titrate it. But here you don't. So it's a little bit unfortunate, and I feel like it throws people more into hypoglycemia because you're not down training and you just keep getting that 5 units, that 5 units or 5 units or the 6 or the 9, depending on how bad their sugar is, and you're never really going down on insulin until you get that threshold, and then you're just stopping it. But realize that you still have these insulin running through your bloodstream.
Yeah, that's one thing I just thought about when you're mentioning that is I'm not sure how insulin gets exactly excreted, but if it's through the kidneys or whatever and your creatinine is elevated, that's going to take a little bit longer to excrete. So now you're over flooded with insulin, and you might have, like you said, these hypoglycemic events.
Yeah. But it's interesting. So also while we're on DKA, I'll just mention real quick the anion gap, because for some reason I was thinking to myself, I'm like, what the hell is the anion gap? Like, you know how you sometimes have those brain farts as a nurse where like you knew it last week, but for some reason you can't remember it this week. I was trying to figure out like, what the hell is the anion gap? So I had to look it up. So basically, anion gap shows how acidic your blood is. So a high anion gap means you're more acidic. A low anion gap means you're more basic. Just a fun fact. So I was like trying to figure out like anion gap. Why the hell do we look at anion gap? CO2. I know why we look at CO2 because we want less CO2. We don't want an acidic environment. But I'm like, I couldn't figure out what the hell the anion gap was.
Yeah. There's just so much in the medical field. Like there's different specialties of doctors, and as nurses you just have to know everything and figure things out. So I totally get it when that happens, man. I'm just gonna share another experience that I had, less about patients and more about just standing up for yourself. And before I talk about this scenario, I just wanted to mention whatever I expressed on the show as far as how unfair it was. I told the charge nurse about that after the event, everything settled down, because it's not about what you went through and how difficult it was. It's to create that safe environment so the next nurse doesn't get screwed over or has that same situation, because I was able to handle it and go out my way and have the patients be safe. But maybe the next nurse might feel overwhelmed, might miss something, and error might occur. And it's funny that it happened. Now I just realized that I did have a little mistake. I hung, you know how you're doing potassium, you have to do like 40 MEQs and it's 10 MEQs every hour in the bag. I was running around so fast that I didn't scan the bag. I just hung the potassium, and then another nurse was helping me out, and she was supposed to hang up potassium, and she asked me if I hung the other bag earlier. I'm like, I did. Oh, and then I look at the computer. I'm like, oh, I didn't scan it. I'll do that later. So yeah, it just becomes unsafe because you're juggling so much. Yeah. In this scenario, I floated from who knows what floor, because we float so much, to oncology. And usually what happens is at 10 o'clock, you find out if you have to float, 10 p.m. By 11 to 11:30, they want you on that unit, but it becomes busy sometimes where you're finishing up meds, something happens with the patient, maybe you got an admission in the beginning of your shift, you're trying to finish charting because there's no way you're going to chart on other patients in a different unit. So I always have a rule of thumb, I'm not going to leave this unit until I finish charting. I show up there at like 11:45 p.m. and the nurse says, I got to go home. I have to be up in the morning. Hands me a piece of paper and leaves. And gives me these 4 patients. And I was just mind blown, guys. I was baffled. I'm like, how is this possible? This has never occurred to me. How is this even legal, right? For me, it's just more about mutual respect as a nurse. Just give me the damn report, because this is just something that we do. It was like an old school Filipino nurse and just handed me the paper, straight business, hasta luego. I'm like, damn. And right away, I went to the charge. I'm like, hey, like, I'm okay with doing this because, you know, I'll look up a patient on the MAR, look at a note. We were critical care. We could figure it out. It's not too bad. But it's just the etiquette and the respect of that. And the charge nurse told me that they didn't want her to go into overtime, so she had to already leave before midnight.
Business.
And I'm just like, what about patient safety? Isn't that our priority in the hospital? Patient-centered care, AKA? And you just dip like that? So that was just rude to me. I try to stand up as much as I can for myself there, but I don't know if that mistake is going to happen again. But I just say that's not fair and that's not safe. Hopefully someone heard me. I didn't go above and beyond and go to the supervisor and complain, but the charge nurse heard me on that case. And it's just, it's just unsafe, especially when you have like the little things that you have to like figure out with what's happening with the patient. Or, you know, one thing I hate is like wound care sometimes. Sometimes I just want the nurse to tell me what's up with the wound, when it has to be changed, what goes where. Sometimes the notes are hard to find. Little things like that. So
yeah, or even, for example, if the nurse said empty the Foley, you're like, hey, did this patient just pee 500 mLs, or we're just already here? Yeah. Or imagine that patient being too low intermittent suction, and there's like 500 of bloody sputum in that. You're like, hey, did this happen before she left? She charted that she counted for 300, but there's 500 in the chamber. Did that 500 just come out, or should I subtract that 300? Like something simple like that. We're just like, damn, you don't know, because if it's 500 out in the last half hour because she left, that's a lot. That's a lot of volume.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like little things like that. You can't ask, because you guys a charge nurse, but what are they gonna say? Is it charted?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's charted, but it's not emptied. So who the hell knows? Did it come out right now, or did it come out during the shift? Who the hell knows?
It's just patient safety. Or sometimes there's a suction canister and you just put a tape and they don't mark the line. You're trying to figure out what your output. Should you call the doctor? Is this really 500 and it's something to worry about? And all those things. Even you're talking about the lower limit of suction. There's a handful of times I caught nurses having a continuous suction. I don't know what it does. Maybe it messes up the K and some other things, but usually what I do is I flip, and then after the report, I tell them, like, hey, by the way, this has to be hooked up to lower limit of suction.
Low key, if there's a lot coming out, I put it on continuous. If there's a lot coming out, this is my thing. It's the way I practice patient-centered care.
Practicing outside the scope, huh?
Yeah. It's still low, but it's continuous.
Yeah. A lot of output. You don't want them to vomit.
Yeah. But I had another interesting case. This patient had myelodysplastic syndrome, and I was looking this up online. There's only about 200,000 cases of this issue in the United States. So this is a really rare condition where, it's a group of disorders that cause you to improperly form blood cells. So it affects your white blood cells, it affects your cells that help with clotting, your red blood cells. So you get anemic, you get thrombocytopenia, you get
leukocytosis,
leukocitopenia. So it affects all your blood cells, all your major blood cells are for some reason immature. And the only way you could kind of survive this, you can't really survive this. So the only way you could treat this is with stem cell transplants. And there's no cure for this. It's basically, once you get diagnosed with it, you have a little bit of time to live. It depends. It could be 4 months. It could be a couple years. Just depends on how well this stem cell transplant is working. So when I got this patient, he came in the same day. I got him when he was already intubated. They intubated him a couple hours before I got him. And it's crazy because he just slowly started deteriorating. I think he survived like 4 or 5 days on the unit. And when I had him, he was still decent. I had him on some light sedation. He was able to follow commands, open his eyes, make his needs known, all that kind of stuff. I took him down for ultrasound of the chest, abdomen, pelvis, because he was also had an infection going on. They weren't really sure what his infection was. We're trying to check all the boxes, so I took him down for that. And I lowered him a little bit. I had him flat, and he was desatting for me, so we kind of rushed it and stuff. But every day he started deteriorating more and more. So I had him about 2 days later, and he wasn't following commands anymore. He was getting encephalopathy. And then my last shift, so that was about 4 days from the initial time that I had him, he was gone. He passed away. So he literally passed away within 4 days. And when I had him, he was completely with it. 2 days later, not following commands, nothing. And then 4 days later, already passed away. So It was really crazy. He had some crazy infection. They couldn't figure out what it was. And then he also had this myelodysplastic syndrome where he was not able to form blood cells properly. So he was getting attacked from all sides, and there's no way his body was able to compensate, because anemia, you're not perfusing your organs well. You have leukocytopenia, where you can't fight off these infections, and now you have thrombocytopenia, where if you have a bleed somewhere, you can't stop bleeding. It's wild, man.
Unfortunately, man.
Yeah.
That's a crazy disease.
Yeah, I was told that his kid came in to visit, and he didn't say a word. He just saw his dad, and he was completely silent the whole time he was there, and just in complete shock.
Wow.
And his dad died 4 days later, just like that. Early 50s.
Damn. I got chills.
Yeah. It's tough, man. Some of the stuff we see, man.
Yeah. All right, brother, let's wrap this one up. Hope you guys enjoyed this debrief where we shared our experiences and how to stand up for yourself as a travel nurse, and then any nurse. If you feel like something is unfair, something is unsafe, speak up. Don't just tolerate it, because it's not just about you. It's about the next shift, the next nurse, and overall the patient safety.
Thanks so much, guys. See you on the next episode. Bye-bye.